Well, to discuss asylum seeker policy and other recent political developments, I was joined a short time ago from Adelaide by Alexander Downer. He was Australia's Foreign Minister for 11 and a half years in the Howard government. Mr Downer, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
We all know that boats of asylum seekers are arriving in Australia at a more rapid rate now than they were in the final term of the Howard government. In your opinion, what does Julia Gillard need to do to slow the boat arrivals?
Well, it's a tough thing to say this, but I think if you want to stop people smuggling, which is essentially what this is about, this isn't about stopping refugees. We take still, I think, about 13,000 refugees a year, and I think Australians are comfortable with that. I think what we're not comfortable with is people smuggling, and if you wanted to stop people smuggling, then the Howard government did do that. I mean, it averaged from 2001 until 2007 about 3 boats a year, which was because of the very tough measures, the temporary protection visas, the offshore processing in Nauru, the excision of the northern parts of Australia from the immigration zone, and very active measures that we took within Indonesia, working with the Indonesians through intelligence agencies, public relations campaigns in fishing villages along the coast of Indonesia. All of these things combined together essentially closed down the people smuggling operations into Australia.
So are you suggesting that Julia Gillard needs to embrace all of the Howard government's policies, including the Pacific solution?
Well, I think it depends what you want to achieve here. I mean, it seemed to me, if I may say so, during the Howard years that the Labor Party wanted to play politics both ways. It wanted to try, on the one hand, to appeal to the constituency of Australia, which was worried about people smuggling, and on the other hand, it wanted to appease the sort of bourgeois inner city elites that form part of its support base, and a lot of its members parliamentary members now come from that demographic. And so you never quite knew what the Labor Party was about. I think if they set aside politics and don't just concentrate on politics here, but concentrate on the hard issue, which is how do we close down people smuggling rackets into Australia, not stop refugees coming. We should have a refugee quota and stick with that. But how do we stop people smuggling into Australia? Then they will adopt many of the policies, if not all of the policies, that were adopted by the Howard government. And I include in that the controversial offshore processing, which we did predominantly in Nauru. We know from the information we had in those days about the people smugglers and how they operated and what they were saying to each other, that people smugglers reckoned that the business wasn't worth the candle if they couldn't bring people directly to Australia, if instead they were going to be diverted to what turned out to be Nauru. So that was very effective in terms of closing down the people smuggling rackets.
As we know, applications from Afghani and Sri Lankan asylum seekers are frozen at the moment. The Rudd government says that security may be improving in those places, although there are other reports that disagree with that. Are you comfortable with asylum seekers from those countries being returned?
Well, I'm comfortable if they're being returned as long as they're returned consistent with Australia's obligations under the United Nations Refugee Convention. I think that there are a couple of issues here, though. The first one are the push factors, that is, people coming from Afghanistan, Sri Lanka and Iraq because of conflict in those countries. The main reason there has been a massive upsurge since 2008 in the number of boats that have come. Or are they pull factors? That is, are people smugglers saying, hey, Australia's changed its policies, it's easier to get into Australia? The obvious answer to that is it's the people smugglers targeting Australia now in ways they didn't for at least 6 years before that, because the rules have been changed in Australia. They follow these things very closely. They've seen that the rules have changed and they reckon they can market the product into Australia more easily than they could with the tougher rules that the Howard government had.
But Australia's been embroiled in a war in Afghanistan for almost a decade. Yeah, the violence there has escalated in recent months.
No, I don't think that's right. I mean, the most brutal part of it was the initial... Well, I think the most brutal part of it was actually the initial part of it, when the coalition forces with the Northern Alliance went into Afghanistan in 2001. There was very fierce fighting at that time. We all know there's been a war going on in Afghanistan It's been going on, of course, for a very long time, but involving coalition forces since late 2001. That's now 2010. That's not a recent event. In Iraq, the level of violence in Iraq fell last month in June to one of the lowest levels it's been for a very long time. Not to say there isn't violence still there, there is, but it has declined very substantially. In the case of Sri Lanka, there's been a long-running war there between the LTTE, the Tamil Tigers, on the one hand, and the Sri Lankan government on the other. That came to an end last year. So I would say this is an extremely phony argument, this argument that the push factors have grown in the last 2 years. Clearly they haven't.
Do you think, Mr Downer, that the broad Australian community would accept a return to the Pacific solution?
Well, I think it's a question of explaining things to people. I don't think the Pacific solution, by the way, was ever terribly popular. I didn't get so much overwhelmed with positive feedback over the years to the Pacific solution, but it was effective. And the fact is, it depends what you want to achieve in life. I mean, is this just a political game? If it's just a political game, then maybe the Pacific solution isn't the way to go. You can think of cleverer stunts and cleverer lines than that. But if you really want to close down people smuggling, if you want to close down the rackets that are going on, then yes, I think that is an essential component of what you had to do.
Well,
I know this.
Sorry, Mr Downer, to cut you off. I was just going to say, talking about the lines that you raised there, the new Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, says that she wants to take the political correctness out of the debate and that people who worry about border security aren't racist. Does that rhetoric sound familiar to you? It's straight out of the John Howard handbook, isn't it?
Well, I don't think John Howard wasn't in favour